The stagecoach rocked hard as it crested the ridge into Laramie Valley, the wheels biting into dry ruts carved deep by cattle wagons and broken dreams. Inside, Clara May Hollings held the curved edge of the seat with one hand and the soft round of her belly with the other, as if bracing against more than just the jolt of the trail. The wind slipped in through a cracked window pane, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and old wood smoke and something colder, familiar. The kind of chill that didn't come from weather, but from a place and what a place remembers about you. She pressed her back to the leather seat, eyes locked on the horizon. And there it was, Langston Ridge seated bold and arrogant against the Wyoming sky, its main house painted cream with green shutters, a porch wide enough for a dozen men to lie and smile on. There were lanterns hung from the fence posts. Banners fluttered from the barn doors. Wade Langston's second wedding was a full-town affair, and she'd been invited. Clara swallowed hard. The paper invitation still lived in her coat pocket, though it burned hotter than the sun on the brim of her hat. Wade's handwriting was still sharp and smooth. Like the man himself, "You are invited, in the spirit of goodwill, to witness my marriage to Miss Millie Powell. It is my hope this gesture will quiet town gossip and display a spirit of peace between us." Peace. The man had no concept of the word. The coach pulled into Laramie's main street as the bell in the chapel rang once noon. Half the town turned to look not at the coach, but at who stepped out of it. And when they saw her, Clara May, in that pale blue traveling coat stretched just a little too tight at the belly boots, polished but cracked, they stared harder. A pair of women whispered behind a picket fence. One tipped her chin toward Clara and muttered, "Well, ain't that bold?" The other scoffed. Or desperate. Clara didn't flinch. She had done her crying elsewhere long before now. She crossed the street without asking directions. She'd lived in Langston Ridge long enough to know every loose board on the saloon porch, every window that creaked open on the mercantile at night. And she knew what the people of this town feared more than scandal. Truth. The ride up the long path to Langston Ridge was quieter. A young ranch hand, barely old enough to shave, was ordered to pick her up with a buckboard and say nothing. He followed instructions well. Clara sat beside him, silent, watching as the wedding party came into view, tables dressed in white cloth, food, piled high, music drifting from a string trio beneath the sycamore trees. Dozens of guests. All of them would see her. And that was the point. As she stepped off the wagon and onto Langston Ridge once more, her boots hit the ground like a challenge. The porch was lined with people she knew, once neighbors, once allies, some who'd called her Mrs. Langston for 3 years and hadn't spoken her name since. She didn't greet them. She walked through them. Inside the main house, voices echoed off polished floors. Laughter, the clink of glass fiddle music winding through the heat. Then, as she crossed the threshold of the front parlor, silence. Clara paused in the doorway. Heads turned. Fans stopped fluttering. Even the string trio faltered. There she stood, back straight, chin lifted, eyes calm and pregnant. 4 months along, not enough to declare, but plenty to whisper about. The pale blue coat did little to hide it, and she hadn't tried too hard. A young woman gasped behind a lace handkerchief. "That's Wade's ex," someone murmured. "Surely he didn't invite to—" He did. Another voice cut in, hushed. Said it was a gesture of reconciliation. Ain't that something? Clara moved forward. Her boots made a slow, steady rhythm against the hardwood. And there he was, Wade Langston, standing tall beside his new bride, Millie Powell, all lace and curls and no idea what she'd married into. Wade's smile never faltered, but his eyes narrowed just slightly when they met Clara's. He looked every bit the successful rancher, gold buttons on his coat, black tie knotted with arrogance. He did not step forward to greet her. Clara looked Millie over, then nodded once. "Miss Powell," she said, "you look like you still believe in happy endings. I hope that doesn't change." Millie blinked. "Thank you, I think." Wade finally spoke. "Clara May," he drawled, "wasn't sure you'd come. But then again, you always did love a stage, and you always did love writing the script." He stepped forward, hand outstretched, performative like everything he did. "Welcome back to the Ridge." Clara ignored the hand. Her voice dropped low. "I'm not here to bless the wedding. I'm here to bury what's left of me." His smile twitched. "You haven't lost anything, Clara. You gave it up." "No," she said, soft but clear. "You took it, and now you want to make sure no one remembers what it cost." Before he could reply, one of the guests called, "Let's have a toast to the bride and grooms." Wade turned to oblige. The moment broke. Clara stepped aside. She didn't leave. She stood at the edge of the crowd, the only still thing in a sea of motion. The music picked up again, the whispers resumed. But the air had changed. She stayed through the first toast and half the second, long enough to be seen, long enough for the fire to catch. Then she turned, walked back down the hill alone. As she passed the barn, a familiar voice called softly from the shadows. Nora Bluebird stepped into the sunlight, arms crossed, long braid over one shoulder. "Girl," she said, "you just kicked the hornet's nest wearing perfume." Clara stopped. "That's the idea." The sun hadn't yet dipped behind the ridge, but the shadows were already growing long across the Langston ranch yard. Clara stood near the split-rail fence just below the barn, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood like she was remembering something that used to live there, peace maybe, or the ghost of it. Inside, the music had picked up again, clumsy fiddling wrapped in high laughter and clinking glasses. Wade was doing what he did best, performing. Clara had once watched him charm a banker into wiping half a year's debt with just a grin and a bottle of bourbon. But this wasn't about cattle or credit. This was about history, and Wade Langston didn't leave anything in his past unedited. Nora stood beside her, now arms crossed. "You sure you want to stay this long? That room's starting to burn." "I'm not leaving," Clara said. "Not until he looks me in the eye and sees I didn't break." "You already proved your point." "No," Clara said. "I've just started making it." She walked back toward the house skirt, brushing against sagebrush and a few wildflowers that hadn't gotten the memo about being trampled. As she stepped through the door, the warm air hit her like a wall perfume pipe smoke and the thick scent of cooked meat and pretense. The parlor buzzed as guests passed around silver cups and rumors. A pair of women from the church committee looked away when Clara walked by, too slow to hide their stares. A young deputy tipped his hat, eyes wide. No one stopped her. No one welcomed her. She wasn't here to be welcomed. She stepped back into the receiving line just as a cousin of the bride's finished offering blessings too syrupy to mean. Wade and Millie stood at the end like dolls in a store window, still smiling, still beautiful, still pretending. Clara walked slowly toward them, letting the weight of her presence fill the space between them, like rising water. Millie's face faltered the second she saw her. Her hand clung tighter to Wade's arm. "Miss Hollings," she greeted, soft and shaky. "Mrs. Langston, I believe," Clara corrected gently. "For now." "Thank you for coming," Millie said, voice thin. Clara nodded once. "I wouldn't have missed it." Wade stepped in, then that smile carved so deep it was practically muscle memory. "Clara May," he said, easy as whiskey. "Still know how to hold a room, I see. I learned from the best." They stood a moment silent under the noise. Wade's eyes flicked once toward her midsection. His expression didn't change. Not visibly. "I have to admit," he said, stepping forward, "you look... well, being away from here will do that to a person." He reached out, then fingers gentle but calculated, like he was brushing a speck of lint from the ribbon tied beneath her bust line. His hand moved with the familiarity of a husband, though the marriage had long since been declared dead. Clara stiffened. "Don't." But he smiled, leaned closer. "Hold still," he whispered. "Always were a little restless." And then the sound. A soft, traitorous rip. Clara felt the tension snap before she even looked. The side seam of her dress, painstakingly altered to allow her growing figure room, had given way under the pressure of his touch. The pale blue fabric split slightly at her right side, not wide but enough. Enough for everyone to see. Enough to ruin any doubt. Gasps swelled around the room like a windstorm rolling through brush. Conversations stopped. Chairs scraped. One man dropped a cup. "Oh, dear Lord," someone breathed. She is another," confirmed low and stunned. "Good heavens. How far along?" a woman hissed. "She showed up like this to a wedding." "Is it his?" a man whispered too loud. "If it were, wouldn't she still be..." "Shush, you're saying too much." Wade's hand stayed frozen in the air, a picture of concern, his brows raised in staged dismay. "Clara, I didn't mean these old seams, they're just so delicate these days." Clara turned toward him slowly. Her face didn't change. Not a flicker. "You haven't touched me in 6 months, Wade," she said. "This child, he's none of your concern." The hush that followed was deafening. A laugh choked out from someone and was quickly smothered. Wade chuckled, too light, pleasant, performative. "Ah, well, still sharp. That's our Clara." He turned to the crowd like he could smooth it all away. "Don't mind her, folks. She always had a flair for the dramatic." Millie looked like she'd swallowed a stone. Her fingers dug into Wade's sleeve. Clara stood her ground. She didn't cover the torn seam. She let them look, let them see. She didn't come to explain. She came to be seen. Wade leaned closer again, this time with venom under the charm. "You've made your point," he said. "No," Clara whispered. "That was just the first nail." Then she turned. She didn't flee. She didn't cry. She walked straight through the stunned guests, head high, her boots tapping that same rhythm, solid and deliberate, as if every step dared them to speak louder. No one did. Outside, the sky was starting to shift, clouds low and pink. The mountains loomed to the west, quiet as always. Clara exhaled. Not in relief, but in release. At the bottom of the steps, Nora was waiting, arms folded, braids slung forward. "I told you it'd burn," she said. "It needed to." "Now what?" Clara looked out at the horizon. "He's going to try and erase me." Nora tilted her head. "You gonna let him?" Clara's hand rested on her belly. "Not a chance." In the Langston house, Wade poured himself a second drink with a hand that didn't shake, but not because he was calm. He was calculating. Across the street, Sheriff Amos Calder stood outside the church with a paper in his pocket. A letter sent from Langston Ridge the night before requesting a wellness check on Miss Clara May Hollings. The sheriff read it again, folded it twice, and walked toward his horse. The porch light was already on by the time Clara stepped onto Dr. Elijah Boone's front steps. Warm amber spilled through the screen door, casting long rectangles on the dusty boards and catching the swirl of evening gnats. The clap of her boots stopped just shy of the threshold. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. He opened the door before her hand could lift. "Elijah," she said low. He didn't speak at first. His eyes scanned her face, then dropped, hesitating a half-second too long at the torn seam near her ribs. She had tried to fix it with a safety pin in the alley behind the mercantile, but the fabric had stretched past saving. "Come inside," he said gently. Clara walked past him into the familiar scent of cedar floors and boiled herbs. Boone's home was simple but clean, full of book stacks, half-finished letters, and oil lamps turned low. The kind of place you could sit for hours and not be asked why. He closed the door behind her. "You all right?" She set her bag down by the wood stove and unpinned the coat. "I'm pregnant, humiliated, and very nearly homeless." "What do you think?" Boone raised a brow. "So, mostly all right then." That pulled the corner of her mouth just slightly, but the smile didn't last. He poured tea without asking and set the cup down in front of her. She didn't reach for it. Her hands rested flat on the table like she needed to feel the grain of something real. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. "No," she said. "Then—" "Yes." He waited. Clara let the silence sit a moment longer before finally speaking. "He tore my dress." Boone blinked. "On purpose, in front of everyone. Right after a toast." Boone's jaw tensed. He leaned back in the chair and exhaled through his nose, slow. "I always knew Wade Langston was dangerous. I just thought he preferred lawyers to knives. He doesn't need a knife. He uses what people believe. He weaponizes reputation," Boone muttered. Clara nodded. "And he thinks mine's already dead. But he invited me to that wedding because he's scared." Boone folded his hands. Of what Clara looked him dead in the eye. Her voice was steady, but something in it had cracked open. "I know a secret that could strip him of everything." Boone didn't answer right away. He reached for the kettle again, refilled her cup, then his. "Then we'd better decide what you're gonna do with it." Footsteps creaked behind them, and Nora Bluebird appeared from the hallway, braid undone, sleeves rolled up, drying her hands on a dish towel. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, sharp as obsidian, went straight to Clara's midsection. "I figured I'd see you tonight," she said. "I'm not here to burden anyone," Clara replied. "Well, too bad," Nora said, crossing the room. "'Cause we already made up the guest bed. Doc here ain't great at fluffing pillows, but I taught him." Boone said nothing, just passed Nora her own cup, then sat down again. The three of them formed a quiet triangle in the dim kitchen light. Clara looked between them. "I never planned on coming back." Nora nodded. "Funny thing about unfinished business. It has a way of waiting." "I wasn't ready," Clara said, "to face it. Or him." "Are you now?" Boone asked. "No," she said, "but I don't have the luxury of waiting." Outside, wind tugged at the shutters. A door creaked on its hinges, tired wood shifting with the night air. Boone finally asked, "What do you know, Clara?" She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small leather bundle. It was old and cracked, tied with a frayed green ribbon. She didn't untie it. She just looked at it. "Years ago, when Wade's father was dying, he called me into his room. He wasn't lucid most of the time, but that night, he was sharp. He said there was something he needed me to know." Nora leaned forward. Boone stayed perfectly still. Clara continued. "He told me Wade wasn't his only child. Said he'd been married once before, legally, long before his marriage to Wade's mother. They had a son. Legitimate." Boone's brows lifted slightly. "Where's that son now?" "I don't know," Clara said. He said the boy was sent away when he was small, raised by the mother's kin in Montana, never told who he really was. Boone rubbed his jaw. That would make him the true heir to Langston Ridge. Clara nodded. And Wade knows it. He found the marriage certificate once hidden in his father's desk. I was there. He tried to burn it. I stopped him. Boone's eyes flicked to the bundle. That's it, Clara nodded once. I've kept it all these years, hidden behind the piano panel in the music room. I snuck it out when he was away on cattle drive. Boone exhaled. So Wade's been living under stolen title for years. And if it gets out, Clara added, Langston Ridge isn't his anymore. Neither is the bank credit, the land contracts, the cattle brand. It all falls apart. Nora let out a low whistle. That's one hell of a secret. Clara finally reached for her tea. Her fingers trembled. I've been scared of what would happen if I spoke it aloud, she said. But now he's dragging me into court, trying to make me look unfit. He sent Amos a letter. Boone's eyes darkened. I saw him at the church steps. He's coming. I know. Nora stood. Then we'd better prepare. He'll come polite first, then legal, then hard. Clara stared into the tea for a long beat. Then, with a voice that barely shook, she said, I'd rather sleep in a chicken coop than owe him one more night's peace. Boone cracked a tired smile. Then the coop is yours. He rose, walked to the cabinet, and pulled down a worn ledger book. If Amos comes, I want to be ready with records, anything that shows you've been under care, stable, not a threat. You're writing me a defense, Clara asked. Boone didn't look up. I'm writing down what's true. If that turns into a defense, so be it. Nora pulled the blankets tighter around the guest bed. You'll sleep here tonight. You want to fight? We'll fight with you. But first, rest. Clara looked at the two of them, one with worn hands and steady eyes, the other with fire in her voice and years of grit under her skin, and nodded. Thank you. Boone paused, then said softly, Tomorrow you tell me everything you remember about that piano. Outside, down the slope of Laramie Valley, Sheriff Amos Calder rode slow and quiet through the dark. Wade's letter was still in his breast pocket, folded neat. His orders were vague, but his gut was not. Something was wrong with the way this was going, and the closer he got to Boone's house, the heavier the letter felt. The envelope came just after sunrise. Boone found it on the porch rail, sealed in red wax. No rider in sight. No footprints. Just the weight of it sitting there like a coiled snake. He picked it up, studied the crest stamped into the back, Langston Ridge carved into silver. He didn't bring it inside right away. He stood on the porch looking out over the thin line of trees that marked the ridge edge. Somewhere beyond them, Wade Langston was already awake, calculating. Inside, Clara sat at the kitchen table with Nora nursing her tea. Her eyes were puffy but clear. She'd slept hard for the first time in days, though even sleep didn't spare her the kind of exhaustion that lived deeper than bone. Boone came in quietly and held out the envelope. It's from him. Clara didn't touch it. Set it down, she said. He did, gently, like it might bite. Nora frowned at the wax. That's not a man sending flowers. No, Clara said. That's a man sending a leash. They stared at it for a long moment. The room felt smaller with it on the table, the kind of stillness that came before storms or confessions. Finally, Clara reached out and broke the seal. The letter was 3 paragraphs handwritten in Wade's flawless penmanship, too perfect, like he knew someone else might read it someday. She read it aloud, slow and steady. Clara, it is my sincere hope you will come to your senses before this situation becomes more complicated. Millie is distraught. The guests were unsettled. And frankly, your presence has upset the order of things at Langston Ridge. I am offering you a sum of $2,000 to return east and raise your child quietly. You will be given a rail ticket rooming house address and 6 months' allowance. There is no need for this to become legal, public, or dramatic. If you choose to remain in Laramie, I will have no choice but to petition the court for a mental health evaluation. Sheriff Calder is already aware. Please, for everyone's sake, consider this an opportunity to exit with grace. W.L. When she finished, the silence pressed in tighter. Boone's jaw worked. He's threatening commitment. And painting it as kindness, Nora muttered. Classic Langston charm. Clara folded the letter slowly, her face unreadable. I remember the first time he lied to me, she said. It wasn't big. Just about a shipment of cattle. Said he sold 20, turned out it was 12. I asked why, and he smiled and said, sometimes you count the calves you should have had. Makes the numbers feel better. Boone's voice was quiet. That wasn't about calves. Clara nodded. Nothing with him ever is. She picked up the letter and moved to the stove. Opened the iron door. Let the flames breathe. Nora stood. What are you doing? Clara held the paper up between 2 fingers, just above the fire. Making a choice, she said. She let go. The flames caught it fast. The wax bubbled, the handwriting curled black. The envelope fell in last, like a body into a grave. He always knew how to break things, he just never expected I'd start with his lease. Nora let out a low breath. Now you're really in it. I was in it the second I walked back into that parlor, Clara said. Boone leaned against the counter. That letter. It reads like something meant to scare you into silence. Clara looked at him. It did. Just not in the way he wanted. They sat back down. The heat from the stove seemed sharper now, like the room had aligned itself to the fire. Nora pulled her braid over her shoulder. So, what's the next move? Clara took a moment before answering. We get the papers. Boone looked up. From the piano, she nodded. They're still there. Or at least they were when I left. Wade never played that piano. Said it was a sentimental waste of floorboard. But his father kept things there. Letters, documents, secrets. There's a false panel in the backboard slides up if you know the trick. Boone raised an eyebrow. And you do, I helped him tune it once years ago. Watched him open it. And Wade never knew. Wade never cared, Clara said. He was always more interested in what could be sold than what should be kept. Boone rubbed his neck. Then we'll have to go get them. But that house isn't exactly open territory now. Nora gave a half grin. I know the kitchen maid. Her nephew's married into my cousin's line. She owes me a favor. Clara's brows lifted. You think she'd help? She'd let us know when Millie and Wade aren't home, Nora said. Might even leave a door cracked. Boone frowned. You're not going alone. Clara stared at him. I'm the only one who knows exactly where they are. I don't care. I do, she said. This is my fight, Elijah. Boone didn't answer right away. His hands curled against the table, not in anger, just helplessness. I know, he finally said. Nora stood. Then we plan it right. No mistakes. You go in, get what's yours, and get out. Clara nodded. That's all I want." Outside, the wind had picked up. A line of dust swirled across the road like it was chasing something. Boone looked at the fire again. "That letter proves something important," he said. Clara raised an eyebrow. "He's not trying to discredit you because you're a threat," Boone said. "He's doing it because he knows you already are one." Nora smirked. Big men always panic when the story slips out of their hands. Clara stood slowly, hand on her belly. "Well, let's give him a story he can't rewrite." That night, under cover of darkness, Clara wrote her own letter. Not to Wade, not to Amos, but to someone who might matter more. She addressed it to an old name she'd only heard spoken once a long time ago, Aaron Langston, a preacher in Montana. It was a long shot. But if Wade's father had told the truth, this man was the rightful heir. She folded the paper, sealed it with wax from Boone's desk, and handed it to Nora. "You sure Nora asked?" Clara nodded. "It's time to bring him home." Down in town, Sheriff Amos Calder stepped into his office and lit the lamp. Wade was waiting boots up on the desk like he owned the place. "Did you talk to her?" Wade asked. Amos didn't answer. "She's cracking," Wade insisted. "You push a little harder, she'll do the work for us." The sheriff met his eyes. "You want her broken. I want the truth." Wade's smile vanished. "You might want to pick a side," he said. Amos blew smoke from his nose. "I did. Long before you got rich." The knock came before breakfast. Boone was cutting apples for Clara when he heard it, 3 sharp raps on the door, too formal to be neighborly, too soft to be urgent. He wiped his hands on a dish towel and opened the door to find Sheriff Amos Calder standing there, hat in one hand, the other resting near the grip of his holster. "Morning, Doc," Amos said. His voice was calm, but his eyes scanned the room behind Boone like he already knew what he'd find. Boone didn't invite him in. "Something I can help you with. I need a word with Miss Hollings." Inside, Clara stood from the table, wiping her hands on her skirt. Her shoulders straightened before she spoke. "I'm right here, Sheriff." Amos stepped onto the porch but didn't cross the threshold. That meant something in a town like Laramie. He was here on business, not as a friend. He took a slow breath. "Got a letter yesterday. Official request from Wade Langston. Says you're showing erratic behavior. Wants me to evaluate whether you're fit to remain unsupervised, given your condition." Clara folded her arms. "You mean pregnant and inconvenient?" Amos didn't flinch. "I mean he's asking the county judge to sign off on a medical evaluation." Boone stepped forward. "That's not how it works. A mental health hold requires cause, not politics." "I know that," Amos said, "which is why I'm standing here and not down at the jail." Clara narrowed her eyes. "So what happens next?" "I write a report," Amos said. "Judge takes it under advisement. If I say you're stable, it dies in the dust. If I hedge, he'll sign the paper and you'll be carted off to Cheyenne for evaluation. 2 weeks minimum." "And if Wade pushes harder?" she asked. Amos looked tired. "Then it won't be about truth anymore. It'll be about who talks louder." Clara didn't speak. Not right away. She was learning to sit with silence, let it stretch long enough to make the other man uncomfortable. It worked. Amos cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're crazy." She lifted a brow. "Then why are you here?" "Because he is." Boone stepped aside. "You might as well come in." Amos hesitated, then followed them inside. He kept his hat in his hand, the brim running slow circles in his fingers, as he took a seat at the kitchen table. Clara poured him coffee. It wasn't an act of hospitality. It was a warning, "You're in my space now." Amos looked her over, not leering, just reading her the way lawmen do. "You look tired," he said. "I am. You've been under stress." "Wade Langston's an entire weather system," she replied. "I've lived in his storm before. Any outbursts, mood swings, erratic thinking." Clara tilted her head. "You mean besides showing up pregnant to my ex-husband's wedding, no?" That earned the faintest twitch of a smile from Amos. He sipped the coffee. Boone sat across from him, quiet but alert. "I'll be honest with you," Amos said. "Wade's got half the town whispering already. Says you've been delusional, that you believe there's some secret air, that you've been hearing things according to him." Clara stiffened. "He's laying groundwork. He's laying manure," Nora called from the hallway. "That's what that is." Amos turned toward her. "Miss Bluebird." She stepped fully into view, arms crossed, calm as still water. "You've known Clara her whole life, Amos. You tell me when's she ever lied, just to hear her voice?" He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Clara leaned forward. "He wants to erase me. Legally, publicly. Make me seem unstable before I can speak. Speak about what Amos asked." She hesitated. Her fingers tapped lightly on the edge of her cup. "I have proof that Wade's not the rightful heir to Langston Ridge," she said. "Documents. A marriage certificate. Letters. His father gave them to me." Amos raised his eyebrows. "Where is it?" "Hidden," she said. "Safe." "Why not bring it forward now?" "Because if I do it wrong, he'll bury it." "Bury me." Boone finally spoke. "And if you wait too long, the story turns against her completely." Amos nodded slowly. "You plan to retrieve this proof, yes," Clara said. "Soon." He looked between them, the weight of law sitting heavy on his shoulders. "You know what you're doing?" "No," she said. "But I know why I'm doing it." Amos stood. "Then I'll hold off my report. For now." She stood with him. "Why help me?" Amos shrugged. "Because the law don't care about truth, Clara. It cares who pays for the ink. But I still care about the truth." She held his gaze. "Thank you." He tipped his hat and left. The door clicked shut behind him. Nora exhaled. That man walks like he's balancing a world on his belt. Boone nodded. "That's because he is." Clara sat back down the fire in her finally cooling enough to let her body catch up. Her hands trembled as she reached for the apples Boone had left half sliced. "I think he believes me," she said softly. "He does," Boone said. "But belief's a poor shield." Nora crossed her arms. "So now what?" Clara looked toward the window. The wind had picked up again, dry and restless. "We go in," she said. "We get those papers." Boone leaned back. "You sure you're ready for that?" "I have to be." Outside, a horse clomped past on the road, followed by two ranch hands heading toward Langston Ridge. The world was moving again, and time was running thin. Nora stepped into the hallway. "I'll reach out to Birdie, see if she's working the evening shift at the house. She'll help," Clara asked. "She doesn't like Wade," Nora said, "and she sure as hell doesn't owe him silence." Clara nodded. "Tell her I'll only need 10 minutes. "Then you better move like the wind," Nora replied. Boone reached into a drawer, pulled out a rolled canvas bag, and handed it to Clara. She opened it to find gloves, a file tool, and a folded rag. "What's this, a silent toolkit?" he said. "For pianos and trouble." She almost smiled. As she tucked it into her satchel, Boone stepped close, his voice quieter. "This won't just change your life, Clara. It'll change his. He won't go quietly. Clara met his eyes. I'm not asking him to. I'm asking him to go. That evening, while Nora made her rounds through town, Clara sat by the fire writing again. A second letter, this one shorter. Just a name, a place, and a sentence: you are not forgotten. It's time. She sealed it, addressed it again to Aaron Langston, and prayed someone on the other end would believe her before it was too late. The night was sharp with cold when Clara stepped out onto Boone's porch, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, the wind snapping at the corners like it had something to prove. Laramie Valley stretched silent beneath the stars, dust frozen in the air, the world holding its breath. She wasn't trying to escape. She just needed space. The truth had been sitting in her chest all day like a hot coal she couldn't spit or swallow. But now tonight, it was time to say it out loud. Because if she didn't, someone else would own the story. Wade would twist it like he twisted everything. Nora joined her without a word, holding out a blanket and 2 tin mugs filled with something that smelled like apple cinnamon and warning. Clara took the blanket and stared into the dark. He has a brother, she said. Nora sipped from her mug, didn't blink. I figured as much. No man fights this dirty unless he's afraid of blood truth. Clara nodded. Half-brother, but not the kind you hide from shame. The kind that should have inherited it all. She sat on the edge of the porch, the boards creaking under her. Wade's father, Charles Langston, married a woman named Miriam Kastner in Montana when he was 19. It was before he ever set foot in Wyoming. Before he had money. She was a school teacher. Not from wealth, but good family. And Nora asked. They had a boy, Clara said. Aaron. Named him after Charles's own father. Why'd he leave? Clara's eyes narrowed. Because Charles had ambition. More than love could hold. He wanted land, title, status. But Miriam came from a family that hated ranch life. They wanted their daughter back east, and Charles didn't. So he left. Nora sat beside her. He walked away from his wife and son. He annulled it in another state, Clara said. Claimed it was never valid. But it was. I've seen the documents. How did you get them? Clara hesitated. Charles gave them to me. Not all at once, over time. He trusted you. Clara's voice dropped. He pitied me. Thought I'd been broken enough by Wade to stay loyal. Nora winced. He was wrong. I stayed quiet, Clara admitted. For years. I convinced myself I didn't know enough. That maybe Wade was the better man after all. But I knew deep down what he was. Why now? Nora asked. Why speak it now with a baby on the way and the whole town half turned against you? Clara turned to face her. Because I'm carrying a child into a world run by liars, and I refuse to let him grow up thinking the truth is optional. Nora didn't speak right away, just nodded. He's out there, Clara said. Aaron, somewhere in Montana, raised by his mother's people. Never told the truth. Maybe doesn't even know he was born a Langston. You sent the letter, Clara nodded. 2 days ago. Told him who he is. What's waiting? Asked him to come. That's a tall ask for a stranger. I'm not asking him to take the land, Clara said. Just to claim what's his. The truth. Boone stepped onto the porch just then, coat buttoned up to his neck. I heard most of that, he said. Thought you should know someone came through the pass this morning. Young man. Quiet. Rode straight to the post office. Asked if anyone knew a Clara May Hollings. Clara stood. Did they tell him where to find me? Boone shook his head. No. But he left a name. She waited. Aaron Kasner Langston. Clara's knees went weak. Boone reached out before she could fall. "He's here," she whispered. Boone nodded. "Staying at the livery overnight. Asked for you." Clara wrapped the blanket tighter, breath hitching. "I need to see him." Nora stood. "We'll go with you." Boone nodded. And if this man's the truth, Wade just lost the only story he ever wrote. They found him seated on a hay bale behind the livery coat, dusty boots, worn but back straight as any preacher. He looked up as they approached. His face was lean-weathered, not handsome but honest. The kind of face that told you more in silence than most men did in sermons. Clara stepped forward, hands trembling. "Aaron," he stood. "You must be Clara." "I am." He took a long look at her belly, then back to her face. "You wrote me. Said we shared a secret." Clara nodded. "You're the first son of Charles Langston." He didn't smile, didn't deny it. Just looked down at his boots like he was calculating how much of his life had just been rewritten. "I always wondered," he said finally, "why I didn't look like the others. Why my mother cried whenever the post came from Wyoming." "I'm sorry," Clara said. He looked at her. "Don't be. You did what they couldn't. You told the truth." Nora stepped closer. "If you're ready, there's a fight coming. Wade's not going to hand over the title just because of a name." Aaron nodded. "Good. I didn't come for handouts." Boone asked, "Why did you come?" Aaron looked at Clara. "To meet the woman brave enough to burn down a dynasty for a child not yet born." Clara's throat tightened. "I didn't burn it. I just lit the match." Aaron extended a hand. "Then let's see how far it spreads." That night, they gathered in Boone's parlor. Clara laid out the documents, marriage certificate letters, a faded photograph of Charles and Miriam. Aaron read them all in silence. When he was done, he looked at Clara. "This is enough." "No," she said. "Not yet. We need the piano papers. They're the cornerstone." "Then we get them," he said. "Together." Nora smirked. "4 of us walking into Langston Ridge. That's either courage or suicide." Boone stood. "We'll make a plan. Hit the house tomorrow night. Wade and Millie are scheduled to attend the winter auction in Cottonwood. House will be near empty." Aaron turned to Clara. "You trust me?" She nodded. "With everything." He met her eyes. "Then let's finish what your fire started." The Langston Ridge estate looked quiet from the ridge, too quiet. The windows were dark, except for the warm flicker in the front parlor, where the hired girl likely kept the fireplace stoked. The wind moved slow over the dry fields, tugging at bare branches, like it wanted to whisper secrets. But the silence tonight wasn't natural. It was loaded, like the whole house was waiting to be breached. Clara stood beside Aaron in the shadows near the eastern fence line, just behind the old shed where Wade used to hide whiskey bottles. Boone was a few yards back, keeping an eye on the main road. Nora had already slipped inside using the back servant entrance. If Bertie had left it unlocked like promised, they'd have 10 minutes. Maybe less. Clara could feel her pulse in her throat. "You sure about this?" Aaron asked, voice low. She gave a tight nod. Every lie in Wade's world was built on what's inside that piano. He looked at her serious as thunder. "Then tonight, we finish it." She met his gaze. "We're not here to steal anything. We're here to reclaim the truth." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Clara adjusted her shawl and stepped forward. The porch steps creaked under her weight, but she didn't flinch. She knew the sound, knew exactly which board to step over, which one moaned too loud. This house had once been hers. Every corner of it still remembered her. The kitchen door gave a soft click when she turned the handle. Unlocked. She slipped an Aaron behind her, moving silent as a whisper. The hallway smelled of lemon polish and old tobacco. A faint hum of the fire could be heard from the parlor. Nora appeared from the stairwell, finger pressed to her lips. She held up 3 fingers, then pointed to the dining room. 3 minutes. That's all they had. Clara moved fast now, cutting through the shadows until she reached the music room. The grand piano sat under a white sheet, elegant and ghostly. Her breath caught. This was where it had started, where Charles Langston told her the truth, where he whispered that Wade wasn't the only son, where Clara had hidden the papers, trembling hands slipping them beneath the false back panel like a secret folded into prayer. Aaron stepped in behind her, eyes wide at the room's size, at the sheer presence of the old piano. "You sure they're still in there?" he whispered. Clara didn't answer. She knelt beside the bench, pulled it aside, and reached under the keys. Her fingers found the groove, slid upward until they caught the lip of the false panel. A faint click echoed just loud enough to make her heart jump. She opened it. Inside, a bundle of old papers wrapped in a faded linen cloth. Clara's hands shook as she lifted it out. She unwrapped it quickly. Records. Charles and Miriam's wedding license, a deed revision that was never filed, letters written in Charles's hand, naming Aaron as heir. Aaron stared at them, stunned. This is everything." She looked at him. "It's the key. To your name. To undoing Wade's theft." He held one up to the firelight. His fingers trembled, but his voice was steady. "This proves he never had the right." And then a floorboard creaked. Clara froze. Nora slipped into the room from the side hall, eyes wide. She mouthed someone's home. Aaron stepped back. He wasn't supposed to be, but it was too late. A voice called from the hallway. Deep, drawling, familiar. "Thought I smelled old secrets burning in here." Wade. He stepped into the doorway, shotgun in one hand, face calm in a way that made Clara's blood turn cold. "Well," he said, "ain't this a family reunion?" Clara stood between him and Aaron, her voice clear. "We're not stealing anything, Wade. These papers are mine. You know they are." He gave a lazy smile. "Everything in this house is mine, including the story. You stole that story." Wade stepped closer. "I built this life, with sweat and blood and grit." "What did you do, Clara?" "Walk away and come back pregnant with a grudge." Aaron stepped beside her. She came back with the truth. Wade's eyes slid to him. For a moment his smile faltered. Just a flicker. "You must be the ghost," he said. "My daddy's little mistake." "I'm your brother," Aaron said, "and I'm here to put an end to your fraud." Wade's grip on the shotgun tightened. "You got no proof a damn judge would honor. You think they'll believe some dusty papers? You think the town's gonna kneel for the boy they never met?" Clara took a step forward, fire rising in her chest. "No," she said. "They won't kneel, but they'll stand, because they're tired of the way you rule." Her voice rose, now shaking the air between them. "This town is held together with silence, and I'm here to break it wide open." Wade raised the gun, but before he could speak, a voice rang out behind him. "Put it down, Langston." Sheriff Amos Calder stepped into the hall, hand on his own weapon. His eyes didn't waver. Wade froze. She broke in. "And you aimed a gun at an unarmed woman and her unborn child," Amos said. In your own house, that's not self-defense, that's desperation. Wade's jaw clenched, but he lowered the gun. Amos moved forward. I got a witness outside. Your maid saw you come back early. Heard what you said. Wade looked ready to snap. But Clara stepped past him, papers clutched to her chest. We're done here. She walked out the front door without another word. Aaron followed. Nora paused, looked Wade square in the eye, and said, You forgot something. What's that? He hissed. Your father wasn't afraid to die. But you're terrified of the truth. She walked out too. Amos lingered last. You want to contest this, Wade, you do it in court. You raise a hand again, I'll put you in a cell so deep your ghosts won't find you. Wade didn't answer. Outside, the wind had picked up. Cold, wild, beautiful. Clara looked up at the stars and finally breathed. The courthouse smelled like dust and old pine, the kind of place where names carried weight and truth had to fight its way in like a stray dog scratching at the door. Clara sat at the long wooden table beside Boone and Aaron, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The documents were neatly arranged in front of her: marriage records, birth certificates, land deeds, letters in Charles Langston's own hand. Proof, all of it. But truth on paper didn't matter much until someone believed it out loud. The gallery behind them was half-full ranchers' townsfolk, a few gossipers hungry for drama. Wade sat on the opposite side of the room, flanked by a high-dollar lawyer from Cheyenne and his new bride, Millie, who looked as if she'd rather be anywhere else. Judge Halbert looked down from the bench, gray eyebrows bushy and low, his gavel resting on a folded napkin beside his water glass. He'd seen enough courtroom lies to fill 10 Bibles and knew better than to trust anyone too quickly. Ms. Hollings, he said, voice deep and dry. You're here making a claim that Mr. Langston, he nodded toward Wade, has unlawfully claimed property and inheritance that rightfully belongs to another man. Yes, Your Honor. And you brought this other man with you. Clara nodded. Aaron Langston. Judge Halbert leaned forward. You're sure of that name? Aaron stood. Yes, sir. You have proof. Aaron held up the letter his mother had written before she died. Boone handed over the documents. Halbert studied them with slow precision. Every second dragged. Finally, the judge turned back to Wade. Mr. Langston, you were aware of these documents. Wade stood smoothly, that same easy smile on his lips he used to use when charming his way out of bar fights or into bank deals. I've seen old papers, Your Honor. None of them were certified. None of them were recorded in this county. This is hearsay built on dust. Clara stood, fire rising in her spine. They weren't recorded because your father hid them, because he was ashamed. Wade raised an eyebrow. And you expect the court to take the word of a woman who burst into a wedding with a torn dress and no witnesses? Boone stood next. She has witnesses now, and the original marriage was recorded in Montana. I contacted the courthouse myself. Halbert glanced over the new affidavit Boone submitted, signed by a clerk in Billings, confirming the original union between Charles Langston and Miriam Kasner. Aaron stepped forward. I never asked for this, he said, voice quiet but firm. I didn't come to steal anything. I came because I was lied to my whole life. I have a right to know who I am, and this woman risked everything to help me do that. Wade scoffed. You came for land. You came because she dangled a fortune in front of you. Aaron didn't flinch. I came because a man raised me to believe that the truth matters even when it costs you. Judge Halbert tapped his gavel once. The room settled. Let me be clear, he said. This isn't about hurt feelings. This is a legal matter. And the law follows paper, not pity. He leaned forward. But the paper says you, Mr. Wade Langston, were never the sole heir. And the letter from your own father, signed and dated, supports that claim. Wade shifted in his seat, jaw clenching. Halbert continued. What's more, I've received a report from Sheriff Calder stating that you attempted to use the threat of mental instability to silence Ms. Hollings, and that you returned early to your home under false pretense and brandished a weapon in an unlawful manner. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Millie's face drained of color. Wade spoke up, voice tight. This is character assassination. She came into my home, stole from me, no. Clara said, stepping forward. I took back what you hid, what never belonged to you. The judge raised a hand. Enough. Silence fell. Judge Halbert looked down at the evidence once more, then sighed. This court recognizes the legitimacy of the marriage between Charles Langston and Miriam Kastner, and acknowledges Aaron Langston as a legal heir to Langston Ridge. Division of property and business assets will be determined in a separate proceeding. Wade slammed his hand on the table. You can't do this. Halbert looked at him unmoved. The law already has. Wade started to rise, but Millie grabbed his arm. Stop, she whispered. It's done. For the first time, Clara saw something break behind Wade's eyes. Not anger, something hollower. He wasn't losing power. He was losing control. And he didn't know who he was without it. As the gavel fell, the room buzzed. Reporters rushed from the back pews. Clara didn't care. She turned to Aaron. It's not over, but it's started. He smiled faintly. You gave me a name. Now let me help you protect yours. Nora appeared from the side door with Sheriff Calder in tow. She was holding a folder, one they hadn't shown yet. This, she said, handing it to the judge, is a ledger showing Wade diverted funds from the ranch to a private account in Denver. For years. Halbert's brow raised. Is this verified? Boone nodded. Bank statements cross-referenced with cattle sales. It's real. Clara stepped forward again, her voice clear. Wade didn't just steal a legacy. He built an empire on fraud. The judge tapped the gavel again, this time harder. We'll reconvene tomorrow for criminal review. Wade stood stunned. As the crowd dispersed, Amos approached Clara. You just cracked this whole damn valley open. She smiled. It was already cracked. I just let the light in. Outside the courthouse, the sky was thick with dust kicked up by the news. Riders would carry the story as far as Cheyenne by sunset. Boone walked beside her, silent for a while. You all right? He finally asked. Clara nodded. Tired, but not scared. He looked toward the horizon. There'll be more coming. I know. She took his hand. But now we fight with the truth. And the truth's finally got teeth. The fire started just after midnight. Boone was the first to smell the smoke. He woke to the sharp, bitter scent of burning hay and oil. For a second, he thought it was a dream until the windows glowed orange and Nora's voice screamed from the hallway. Barns lit up. He grabbed his boots and coat in one motion, heart-hammering instincts sharp from years of backcountry emergencies. Clara was already halfway down the stairs, robe clutched at her belly hair, loose and wild. Boone grabbed her arm. You stay inside. I have horses in that barn, she snapped. I don't care. You're carrying a life we're not losing to tonight. Nora shoved a pail into his hands and ran ahead barefoot, her long braids swinging. Outside, the cold bit hard, but the flames were hotter, twisting through the rafters like a living thing. By the time Boone reached the barn, it was clear the whole structure was done for. Flames tore through the roof wood, snapping like bones, the horses already let out, and scattered into the field. Aaron came out of the smoke leading the last colt by the reins, soot on his face. Someone poured oil along the back wall. Boone cursed. Wade Aaron nodded grimly. Has to be. Nobody else hates this much. Boone looked toward the house where Clara stood on the porch, eyes locked on the burning barn. The orange glow reflected in her eyes like a vision of war. Boone walked back toward her smoke, still clinging to his clothes. He's sending a message, Clara said before he spoke. Boone nodded. And I got it loud and clear. Wade doesn't want the land anymore, Clara said. He wants the ashes. By morning, the barn was nothing but blackened timber and scorched earth. The sheriff came just after dawn, tired and already angry. Amos surveyed the wreckage with his hat in his hands, eyes red from more than smoke. I found boot prints, he said. Heavy, not local make. Whoever did this came through the tree line behind the property. No horses on foot. Professional, Aaron asked. Amos nodded. Or desperate. Nora stood by the fence, arms crossed, jaw clenched. You think he'll stop now? No, Clara said. He's just getting creative. Boone turned to Amos. What can you do? Not much. No witnesses. No proof. But I can keep a deputy nearby. Clara looked down at her hands. They were steady. She didn't feel steady, but they were. That counted for something. I want to rebuild the barn, she said. Boone raised an eyebrow. Already. Yes. If I don't, he'll think he's winning. Aaron kicked at the dirt. He won't just hit us once. He'll keep swinging until he breaks something. Clara's eyes hardened. Then we hold the line. They worked through the day, clearing the debris. By evening, neighbors had come by with boards and tools. Old ranchers and young field hands. Some came for the gossip, others for the principle. But they came. Clara stood in the middle of it all, directing like a foreman. Smoke still clung to the air, and soot smeared her sleeves, but her voice was calm and clear. When Amos came back late in the afternoon, he brought more than a deputy. He brought paperwork. This is a formal protective order, he said, handing it to Clara. Restraining Wade from setting foot within 1 mile of this property. If he violates it, we arrest him. Clara held the paper. He won't care. No, Amos said, but now we can finally act instead of react. Nora leaned on her shovel. He's still got friends in town. Still got favors he can call in. Boone looked out toward the ridge, and if he doesn't have them anymore, he'll pay for new ones. That night, after the fires had cooled and the workers gone, Clara sat on the porch with Aaron. He was quiet, staring up at the stars. You okay? She asked. He nodded slowly. Just thinking how strange it is. I lived most of my life not knowing who I was, and now I'm here in the middle of someone else's war. Clara gave a tired smile. It's not someone else's anymore. He made it yours when he burned that barn. Aaron nodded. He's unraveling. He's scared, Clara said. He built his whole life on control. Now it's slipping and he's trying to crush anything that reminds him. Aaron looked over at her. Why didn't you leave him sooner? She didn't answer right away. The silence sat heavy between them. I did, she said finally. I just left slow. Elsewhere, Wade sat in the study of the Langston house, drink in hand, fire flickering low. Millie stood by the window watching the horizon, like the truth might ride up on horseback. You burned their barn, she asked, voice hollow. Wade sipped. I warned her. She didn't listen. You think fire's gonna fix it? I think fire makes people scared. and scared people stop asking questions. Millie turned to him, arms crossed, or they start asking louder. Wade stood glass still in hand. You married me for a name. Don't forget what it cost to build it. She stepped forward. I didn't marry you to watch you destroy yourself. He stared at her. Then leave. Millie flinched but didn't back down. Not until you admit you're losing. Wade's voice dropped. I'm not losing. I'm reminding this town who owns the ground beneath their feet. But even he didn't sound convinced. Back at Boone's ranch, Clara moved through the house slowly. Her body ached, her chest tight. Every movement took effort, but something deeper kept her going. She stepped into the nursery. The crib Boone had carved sat by the window, still empty. She stood there for a long while, hand resting on her belly. Boone joined her, his voice low. We can leave. It's not weakness to walk away from fire. Clara shook her head. It is if the fire follows you. He rested a hand on her back. You don't have to carry this alone. I'm not, she whispered. But I have to be the one to finish it. Outside, the wind was shifting again. A storm on the edge of the sky. The next morning, Clara opened the newspaper and saw it. Langston Heir confirmed court orders, asset review. The headline was bold, but below it in smaller print, Langston Ranch fire raises questions about retaliation. Her name was in the article. Aaron's, too. The town wasn't whispering anymore. It was choosing shhs. Boone came in with fresh coffee. He set it down, glanced at the paper, then at her. Words out. She nodded. Let them read. Nora came through the door. Next eyes lit with something new. Letter came for you. She handed it over. Clara opened it with shaking hands. One line in careful script, I know what Wade did to your father. You're not alone. No name. No return address. But a storm was coming, and now she knew it wasn't just hers to weather. The letter stayed folded in Clara's pocket for hours before she dared open it again. Something about the slant of the handwriting. It wasn't familiar, but it wasn't new either. It had the kind of weight a person used when they were scared to be ignored, or scared to be caught. By sundown, she was sitting on the porch steps with Nora, the letter spread between them like a ghost. Read it again, Nora said. Clara's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. I know what Wade did to your father. You're not alone. Nothing else, no signature, no details. Just a knife slid under the door of memory, slicing something wide open. My father died 10 years ago, Clara whispered. Fell from a horse, they said. But he wasn't careless. He rode since he could walk. I never believed the story. Nora leaned forward, elbows on her knees. You think Wade had something to do with it? Clara stared out toward the horizon where dusk was swallowing the sky. He hated my father. Thought he got in the way. Thought he didn't respect him enough. But mostly, he knew Daddy didn't buy the act. Boone stepped out, then holding a small tin box in his hand. I found this in the attic, he said, handing it over. It's your dad's old pocket ledger. Might be something in there. Clara opened the lid slowly. Inside was a worn, leather-bound book, pages, yellowed edges curled. Her father's handwriting filled every inch. Dates, livestock counts, weather notes. But tucked in the back were 5 pages marked with a red ribbon. She turned to them. Langston overextended, lying about cattle numbers, shorting hired hands. I've seen the receipts, Clara read aloud. Threatened me today, said I was meddling, Warned me not to tell Clara. Said if I kept pushing, I'd regret it. She stopped reading. Her throat burned. Nora whispered, "That's motive. That's intent." Boone's jaw was tight. We always suspected Wade played dirty. But this reads like premeditated silence. Aaron joined them, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd been in the workshop all afternoon, sawing boards for the new barn. "What's that?" he asked. "Proof," Clara said. "And a warning my father left me a decade ago." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Clara stood, resolve hardening her spine. "We need more. A journal isn't enough to take this to court." Aaron nodded. "Then we talked to people. The ones Wade tried to shut up." The next day, they rode into town separately, keeping quiet eyes on them to a minimum. Boone headed to the records office. Aaron went to the stockyard. Nora visited 2 former Langston Ranch Hantantans who'd left town after Clara's father died. Clara went to the church. Reverend Elijah Kane had baptized her, married her, and buried her mother. He was old, half-blind, and no longer preaching, but he remembered everything worth remembering. When she found him sitting on the chapel steps whittling a piece of driftwood, he didn't look surprised. "I heard about the fire," he said, without looking up. "And the trial." Clara sat beside him. "I need your help." He gave a slow nod, kept carving. "Did you know my father didn't die the way they said?" Elijah stopped his knife. "I knew he didn't die easy." Clara looked at him. "What do you mean Elijah set the driftwood down?" "I was called to pray over his body. The sheriff said it was a fall, but your daddy's hands were bruised up bad, like he'd been in a fight. And his ribs busted, but not from the fall. Looked like someone kicked him while he was down." Clara's stomach turned. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I did," he said quietly. "To the sheriff, to the coroner." But Wade was already 2 steps ahead. "Paid off the doctor. Sheriff couldn't push it without risking his job." "And you never told me I was waiting," Elijah said. "Waiting for you to be ready." She closed her eyes. "I've been ready for years. I just didn't have the words." Elijah reached into his coat and handed her a worn envelope. "I kept this. Found it on your daddy's desk the night he died. Thought you'd need it someday." Clara opened it. Inside was a note, short, scrawled, unfinished. "If anything happens to me, it's Wade. He's hiding more than debt. Clara, don't trust him. Not with your name. Not with your future." Her hands shook as she folded it. That evening, the 4 of them sat in Boone's kitchen, every piece of paper as laid out like a map of grief and betrayal. The letter, the ledger, the witness accounts from Nora's visits. Even one ranch hand's signed statement that he saw Wade arguing with Clara's father the day before the fall about numbers not adding up in family business. "This is enough to open a formal inquiry," Boone said. "Not a trial yet, but it's close." Aaron nodded. "And the court of public opinion is shifting fast. The article this morning mentioned Wade's temper. Folks are talking." Clara looked down at the note from her father. "I want the world to know what he did." Boone leaned in. "You sure this kind of truth, once it's out, it doesn't just scar him? It marks you too." She met his eyes. "Good. Then maybe people will stop calling me the mad woman who crashed a wedding." The next morning, Clara handed the packet to Sheriff Amos Calder. He read every page twice, then looked up at her eyes, tired. "This'll stir up hornets," he said. "Good," Clara replied. "Maybe it's time they got stung." Across town, Wade sat in his office staring at a telegram from Cheyenne. An investigator was coming. His fingers clenched the paper. Millie stood in the doorway, arms folded. "You started a war," she said. Wade turned his voice low. "No. I was the war." "No," she said, backing away. "You were just the fire. And now you're the one burning." The train hissed into Laramie just after noon, metal grinding like thunder over dry tracks. From the platform, Clara watched the lone man step off dark coat, flapping in the wind, hat pulled low. He didn't carry a briefcase, just a rolled leather satchel, and the kind of face carved by years of hearing lies and recognizing the moment truth finally showed up. "Agent Silas Doyle," he said, extending a hand to Clara. "Territory-appointed investigator." Clara shook it, her grip firm. "I'm Clara May Hollings." His eyes searched hers. "You're not what I expected. Neither is the mess I'm asking you to clean up." They rode in silence to Boone's ranch. The others were already gathered, Aaron, Nora Boone, and Sheriff Calder, all seated around the big table like generals at war council. Doyle set down his satchel and spoke in clipped, measured tones. "I've read the documents you sent. Ledger entries, witness statements, unsigned letters. It paints a story, but stories don't win trials. Proof does." Clara met his gaze. "Then I'll show you where the story began." That afternoon, she took him to the bluff overlooking the creek near Langston Ridge, the place her father died. 10 years later, it hadn't changed much, still dry, still quiet. But Clara could feel the ghost of that day in every wind gust, every brittle twig beneath her boot. She pointed to the edge. "This is where they say he fell. Broke his neck." Doyle stepped closer, crouched. The dirt's packed too tight. No fresh erosion back then. If he fell, it wasn't from the top. She nodded. There were bruises on his knuckles. The preacher saw them. Doyle scanned the slope. This wasn't a fall. It was a dump site. Clara swallowed. "You believe me, I believe your father didn't walk off this bluff. And I believe someone wanted folks to think he did." They returned to town that evening. Word had spread fast. Silas Doyle in town meant trouble for someone, and everyone knew who. Wade's men were quieter at the saloon. The mayor stayed out of sight. Even Millie hadn't been seen since the courthouse. Clara walked through town with her head high. The wind carried whispers, but this time they didn't sting. They sounded more like doubt. Outside the Langston office, she stopped. Boone joined her. "You sure you want to do this tonight?" She nodded. "I'm not waiting for the law to catch up. I'm ending this where it started." They walked through the front doors. Inside, Wade was standing by the fireplace, drink in hand. No jacket. No smile. Clara didn't wait. "You staged my father's death." Wade turned slowly, his voice low. "That's a big accusation for a woman who's been losing her mind in public. Except now I have proof, witnesses, and a federal investigator who doesn't owe you a damn thing." Wade chuckled, but it was hollow. "You think the law will bury me? I am this town." "No," she said. "You're the rot under its floorboards." Aaron stepped forward. "We have your letters, the old ledgers. The man who cleaned your books is ready to talk." "And me," said a voice behind them. Millie stepped out from the back hallway, pale but upright. "I found your ledger," she said, tossing a bound book onto the desk. "The one you hid under the floorboards." Wade's jaw locked. "You said you were doing this for us," Millie added, voice cracking. "But all you ever wanted was to be untouchable." Wade's voice dropped to a growl. "You don't know what it took to build this." "No," Clara said. "But I know what it cost." And I'm not letting my child grow up thinking fear is something we inherit. She stepped forward. You wanted control. But what you really feared was someone brave enough to speak without shaking. Wade's hand twitched near his belt. Boone stepped between them fast. You lay a hand on her, and I'll put you in the ground before the law gets a chance. Wade stepped back, chest rising with fury. But then the door opened. Doyle walked in, silent as a storm. He looked at Wade like a man measuring a coffin. I've seen enough, he said. The territory court will convene in Cheyenne. You'll come with me. Wade laughed short and bitter. You think this ends with courtrooms? You think these people will stand against me when it's over? Doyle didn't blink. They already are. Sheriff Calder stepped into view behind him. I've got your travel orders, Langston, and a set of cuffs just in case. Wade looked around the room. No one flinched. No one moved. Millie turned her back. Clara walked toward the door. You'll be judged by men who don't owe you dinners or contracts, and when you speak, they'll see the cracks. Wade called after her. You think you've won? She paused at the door. No, she said, but I think you've lost. And that's finally enough. Outside, the sky was wide and deep and wild. The wind had softened. The town lights glowed warm in the distance. Aaron walked beside her, hands in his coat pockets. Think they'll convict him? I don't know, Clara said. But I know the truth's been spoken. Boone joined them. He'll fight like hell. But you're not alone anymore. Clara smiled, tired but steady. I never was. I just didn't know it yet. From behind, the door shut with a final thud, a sound like a chapter closing. The morning Wade Langston stood trial in Cheyenne, Clara didn't attend. She stayed in Laramie, where the frost had just begun to melt from the fields and the wind no longer carried ash. Boone had offered to ride with her to the courthouse, but she'd shaken her head gently. Let the past bury itself, she'd said. I've got things to build. Instead, she stood in the clearing where the barn once was, sunlight filtering through pale winter clouds. The new frame had gone up 2 days earlier. The roof would follow. And then slowly, everything else. Aaron drove nails into a beam while Boone cut fresh timber near the fence. Nora was in the kitchen already baking before first light, claiming it helped her think. Clara watched it all from the porch, one hand resting on her belly. She was due in a few weeks. They hadn't picked a name yet. But she knew the child would be born into a different kind of world. One where fear no longer ran the ranches and lies didn't get to decide who mattered. Wade's trial was making headlines. Fraud, threats, evidence of obstruction, rumors of deeper crimes too, but the trial focused on the ones they could prove. Silas Doyle had written her that morning short, direct as always. Testimonies strong, juries cold. He won't walk. She believed him. Still, she didn't care if Wade rotted in prison or vanished from the maps entirely. What mattered was this: he wouldn't hold her story anymore, wouldn't own her name, wouldn't silence the people who dared remember what he'd tried to erase. The truth had finally found its voice, and it sounded like hammers, like timber being lifted, like laughter rising out of grief. It sounded like home. Later that day, Clara walked the fence line alone. She needed the silence, the space. The land here had grown quieter since the trial began, like the valley itself had exhaled. As she walked, she found herself near her father's tree, a gnarled cottonwood at the far edge of the property, where he used to sit and whittle the knife clicking slow against the grain. She could still hear it in memory, his voice humming old cowboy songs low and gentle. She knelt there, hand against the trunk. "Daddy, I did it," she whispered. "I said what needed saying. I told the whole damn truth." The wind stirred. "I thought I'd feel relief when it was over," she went on, voice soft. "But all I feel is tired and wide open. Like something broke loose in me and I don't know if I can hold it." The breeze moved through her hair like an answer. "You always said legacies ain't built from land. They're built from what we protect when it's hardest. I get that now." She stood hand still on the bark. "I'm gonna protect this place, this family, this name." Her voice didn't tremble. "And I won't do it with silence." That evening, a letter came. Not from Cheyenne this time, but from Millie. It was short, careful, but kind. "Clara, I left. I've gone to stay with family down south. Thank you for saying what I was too scared to say. I hope you find peace there on the ridge. Maybe we all will someday. M." Clara read it twice, then tucked it into the back of her ledger. She wouldn't write back. But she was glad Millie had written it all. Some debts were settled not by vengeance, but by the courage to walk away. The baby came during the first snowfall. It was a long labor, quiet but fierce. Boone stayed by her side, silent except for the prayers he whispered under his breath when he thought she couldn't hear. Aaron and Nora waited outside, pacing. At dawn, a baby girl was born, red-faced and loud enough to wake the stars. Clara held her close, tears slipping down her cheeks. Boone asked softly, "What'll we call her?" Clara didn't answer at first. She looked at the girl, dark hair, strong lungs, eyes still closed, and then toward the window where snow dusted the fence line like peace finally settling in. "Hope," she said. "Her name's Hope." Boone smiled, kissing her forehead. "Hope Hollings," he whispered. "Sounds like someone who don't take kindly to lies." Weeks passed. The days got longer. The ridge found rhythm again. Aaron took over day-to-day operations, managing the livestock with a quiet confidence Clara admired. Boone built a windmill by hand, piece by piece. Nora stayed, saying she'd meant to leave a dozen times, but the coffee's too good and the company better. Letters arrived from Cheyenne. Wade had been sentenced 6 years in prison with no chance of parole. The town didn't hold parades, but it did let out a breath it had been choking on for a decade. The Langston name no longer meant fear. It meant something new. It meant truth survived. One quiet afternoon, Clara sat on the porch with Hope asleep in her arms. Aaron rocked nearby, eyes on the horizon. Boone was fixing the gate. The wind carried the scent of hay and old pine. Aaron broke the silence. "You ever think about leaving after all this?" Clara looked down at her daughter, then out at the ridge. "Once," she said. "A long time ago." "Why didn't you?" She smiled. "Because this land holds more than memory. It holds redemption." Aaron nodded. "Think it'll last?" She took a deep breath. "It will if we keep speaking. Even when it's hard. Even when no one wants to listen." She looked at her brother. "You know what I've learned through all this, what? The most dangerous thing Wade ever did wasn't lie. It was make everyone believe silence was safer than truth." Aaron nodded slowly. "And now we speak." She looked down at Hope again, brushing a curl from her brow. "And we teach the next ones to speak too." The sun dipped behind the hills. The sky turned soft with gold. Somewhere a coyote howled, life loud and unafraid. Clara smiled, the ache in her chest finally gone. Not everything could be fixed, but enough could be rebuilt. Enough could be made new. And that was more than survival. That was legacy.